Hey, everybody. Welcome back to our second episode of We Talk Creepy. I'm your host, Queen Bean. Today, we are going to talk about my story, Worms. And I don't believe we need a trigger warning for anything in the story. Um, we do talk about a psychiatrist who's absolutely not out of his goddamn mind. Yeah, this should be fun. Sit back and enjoy. They say you're born afraid of only two things: falling and loud noises. That means everything else is environmental. That being said, I have the odd fear of worms. The specific term for this is vermophobia, which sounds like the fear of vermin, like rats or mice. But I don't make the rules here. My fear of worms stems from my two brothers. Even at 18, I am still the baby of my siblings because I have two older brothers, Donovan, 25, and Mitchell, 23. This story takes place roughly 10 years ago, but still needs to be told. When I was 8, I had different interests than my brother did. They liked to go fishing and play football and roughhouse with each other because our dad used to roughhouse with them. But after I was born, my dad didn't have much time for me, so he left me to my brothers and my mom. I liked to stay inside and read or draw while they were outside. I liked to help my mom cook and clean and do housework. I was mommy's boy. I thought it was awesome. I never got in trouble, and I always got to get the beaters when my mom and I baked cake. One night, mom and dad went out to dinner and left me under the care of Donovan and Mitchell. We usually got along well because they typically didn't bother me. I kept to myself in my room, and they would be out in the living room watching television. This night, I was particularly tired, so I crawled into bed and fell asleep with my TV on a low volume setting so I didn't wake up to a loud commercial or show in the middle of the night. I was in a particularly light sleep when I felt something on my chest. I thought maybe it was the cat, but when I moved, he didn't jump off of me. Sleepily, I tried to brush whatever it was off of me, but it just wasn't one thing. It was a mess of things, and they were slimy, moving, and covered in dirt. I sat up and turned on my lamp and looked down horrified. It was a whole mess of night crawlers and worms. I screamed and I totally sounded like a little girl. I heard footsteps running down the hall, heavy ones too. Dad busted into my room with a bat, and Mom was right behind him. Donovan and Mitchell behind her, trying to contain their laughter. Mom picked me up out of bed, and Dad yelled at my brothers for about a half hour, not only for scaring me and waking them up, but for ruining my bed sheets. I got to sleep with Mom and Dad that night. The next day, Mom was determined to get all the slime and dirt out of my blankets, but I didn't really want to sleep in them, even if she did. Don and Mitch got grounded for a week. I got new bed sheets because, despite my mother's efforts, she could not get the smell out. My dad and I burned the sheets in the burn barrel that night. After that week, my brothers tormented me with worms every single chance they got. They didn't care how much they got grounded because they found it hilarious to watch me cry in the corner and relive that night. Well, I guess at some point or another, Mom and Dad decided it was time that I got over this fear, and they brought me to a psychiatrist who was supposed to be able to cure childhood fears in 6 or fewer visits. Now, I know you're thinking that going to a psychiatrist who could get me over a fear in 6 visits or less is a wizard, or that he must have some amazing advanced techniques. Let me tell you, this is completely false. And what he did to me was absolutely barbaric. The first, second, and third visits were pretty normal. We sat and talked in the office, and not much else happened. The fourth visit, he brought a bowl of worms with him. I sat on the couch, as far away from them as I could. The fifth visit, he tried to make me touch them, and I was not having it at all. But he wouldn't let me go home until I had fully submerged my hand in the bowl. It felt gross. They wiggled and writhed in and around my hand and between my fingers. The sixth visit, he told me he wasn't going to make me touch them anymore because I'd done so good at our last visit. I thought it was over, but I was still totally grossed out by worms. I drank some water and I started to feel really sleepy. I dozed off. I woke up and all that I could see was that I was in his office and there was a giant box enclosing my body. I could not see my body, but I knew I was strapped down to a chair. My ankles and wrists were bound, and I was being forced to sit there. I moved my fingers, but I couldn't feel my own skin. I was in a bodysuit of some sort. What was happening? As my senses came back, my doctor was sitting in the room, and he had so many boxes with them. So many. What could be in them? To my demise, I was about to find out. He opened one and showed me worms and night crawlers. I laughed as if it was a joke. My face said otherwise. I was clearly uncomfortable. He walked over, and I fought against the chair, and he dumped a box of worms into the box around me. The realization that he was going to submerge me neck deep in worms set me off. I pleaded for him to stop, but he didn't. I told him they didn't bother me as much anymore. He continued to open boxes one by one. He dumped in boxes before I knew it. My reality came true. I was submerged and encased by hundreds, no, thousands of worms. They wriggled and writhed all over. I could feel them moving against my skin-tight bodysuit. I begged, and I begged him to let me out, and he said that he would, once I calmed myself down. I started to have a panic attack. I couldn't breathe. I started to get tunnel vision. I eventually passed out from hyperventilating, but when I woke up, I was still in the box, and the worms were still there. I went to my happy place. I was in the kitchen with Mom, baking snickerdoodle cookies. I asked him very calmly, to please let me go, and I was no longer going to freak out. I could handle this now. He unlocked the box, and it came up over my head on hinges. The worms wriggled and writhed all over his floor. He unlocked my wrists and my ankles and told me I could leave the bodysuit on the couch. I left the office cured. I never cringed when my brothers brought worms around me again. My brothers eventually got bored of this and left me alone. I never told anyone about what this doctor did to me, but I'm pretty sure it was more traumatizing than what my brothers could have ever done to me. Alright guys, that's all I have for you today. Super glad that this one was nice, super short, considering that last month's was nearly an hour long. It took a lot to record that. There was lots of editing, lots of retakes, lots of everything. So I'm super glad that this episode is nice and short and sweet. It's under 10 minutes. I hope you guys have a great month, and I will see you April 1st. Bye.